Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us today for the third edition of the Mazars Consumer Product Virtual Forum. Today, we will have the chance to explore several 2022 retail trends with an esteemed panel. For those who don't know me, I am Julie Petit. I run the Mazars Consumer Product Practice. At Mazars USA, we are pleased to provide our consumer product customer with a wide range of services going from financial audit to complex financial advisory services. And as such, our consumer product professionals have developed unmatched industry-specific expertise and have a unique understanding of the critical issues and competitive challenges facing the industry. So our group keeps a pulse on the industry, and this forum is a great way to discuss what we've been observing these last few months. The pace of changes we have been facing in the last 2 years was remarkable in various areas like consumer demands, new technology, supply chain disruption. And as we are just coming out of the global pandemic, inflation and global geopolitical tensions are on the rise with certain impacts in our industry. So I will leave the floor to Caroline Brown, who will be joined by Mary Driscoll and Richard Kestenbaum to get the discussion going, and I hope you will all enjoy it.
Thank you, Julie. So I want to welcome everyone to today's forum. I want to introduce myself. So I'm Caroline Brown. I'm a senior manager from Mazars USA, and I specialize in luxury and consumer products clients. Before we get started, I want to introduce you to our esteemed panelists. So Marie, would you like to go first?
Sure. Thank you. Marie Driscoll. I'm with Coresight Research, Managing Director, Luxury and Retail. Coresight sits at the intersection of retail and technology. We work with 6,000, or we have a database of 6,000 retail tech startups that are changing and disrupting the way retail is being done. So we are rooted in research, we do advisory work, we attend events, and I'm delighted to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mary. And Richard?
I'm Richard Kestenbaum. I'm a partner at Triangle Capital. Our website is trianglecapitalllc.com. We do mergers and acquisitions. I find lately when I say that, people think we buy and sell companies for ourselves. We don't. So to just make clear what we do, people who want to typically sell a company will come to us, they'll hire us, we'll sell the company for them. We'll get them the highest value and maximize their outcomes, and they pay us fees. And we specialize in retail and consumer, and I'm also a contributor to Forbes, where I write about retail and consumer.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So before we get started, I just want to let the audience know that we will be taking questions in the Q&A. So please look at the Q&A at the bottom of your screen and send in any questions, and I'll be monitoring it throughout the session. Okay, so the first thing we wanted to talk about is the current economic environment. So maybe Richard, we can start with you. What current issues do you think the retail industry is facing right now?
I think there are probably two issues that are important for retail right now. One's short term and one's longer term, only because we'd like the solution to be shorter term, but it's going to be longer term. And the short term issue is inflation. Mm-hmm. And I think that for retailers and for brands, inflation is a problem, but it's as much of an opportunity as it is a problem, because it's such a competitive industry that the pressure on prices for the last 20 odd years has been intense. And especially in fashion, particularly, the real prices have been going down for decades. And now is a time when wholesalers, retailers, and consumers are all ready to hear that the prices are going up, and it's not stopping anyone. So there's a real opportunity for brands and retailers to recover costs by increasing prices and to set themselves up in a good position. Now, you'll argue that when you do that, inflation is self-accelerating, and you're absolutely right. But we're all responsible for looking after our own short-term interest, and that is the reality of what's happening and why inflation is accelerating. Longer term, I think the problem in the retail industry right now is, how do you adapt to a world where consumers are both online and in stores. And what I mean is, how do you get an online store to be as effective in converting browsers into customers as physical stores? And how do you get a physical store to be as effective in collecting real data on what consumers are doing as online? And the answer to that involves a ton of technology, and it's going to take a long time for that technology to develop. I think metaverse is part of the answer to that, but it's in development. We see it in hundreds of different ways, and that's where the world is going, in my view.
Okay. And Mary?
Yeah, just to piggyback on what Richard said about inflation. Inflation is big. It's across the supply chain. I was just looking at like inflation in grocery today, and the PPI, or the Producer Price Index, was up 14%, and the CPI was up half that amount. So this tells you that brands and retailers are being squeezed. They're passing things through to the consumer, but how long does this stay? And one of the big opportunities I see, and I see this across retail, is the opportunity to really rejigger the supply chain, bring it closer to home, and have less money tied up in inventory. Like with the inflation, it means that retailers and brands are tying more of their working capital up in inventory and hoping it will sell. And isn't this an opportunity to, if the consumer is willing to accept these higher prices, great. But we know the supply chain is broken. We think it's going to be broken through most of the year. And Ukraine just adds more complication to that. So if the supply chain is if it's difficult to make and manufacture and the consumer, shouldn't we be making less, making more of what the consumer wants and is willing to pay full price for, and using that as an opportunity to become a more sustainable industry? So that's I see that these headwinds of inflation as allowing for that. And then, I think another immediate issue that the retailers are facing this year is, as we are in the denouement of COVID, the consumer wants more experiences, and we're all going back out, and we're going to the theater, we're going to the movies, we're eating out, we're spending money on experiences, we are planning trips. I think planning trips is up nearly 20% versus a year ago. So inflation is going to hit the consumer in terms of less discretionary income, and at the same time, they want to spend on experiences. They're experientially starved from 2 years of COVID. So that's another thing that's hitting retail this year. And how do we manage that? So that's where this broken supply chain, the ability to get product in, who's going to be able to get product in, and getting product in at the right price, it seems to me an opportunity to just fine-tune and make the supply chain more sustainable.
Let me say one more thing about inflation.
Sure.
Inflation stimulates demand, to put it simply. And the reason for that is consumers inherently say to themselves, if I don't buy it today, it's going to be more expensive tomorrow. And it causes them to want to spend more in the short term. And we see that happening. So it's a hard thing to stop, but when it's going, it causes itself to keep on accelerating logarithmically.
Do you think there's a risk that if brands keep pushing the prices up to match these rising costs, that it could damage their reputation or the loyalty of the brand, and they could they only can go up so much with the prices? Is that something that you see as a risk?
Well, I think, what you're asking about is the elasticity of demand. And we know that when you raise interest rates, it's highly elastic, and it has a crushing effect on the economy. When the price of a Prada handbag goes up a lot, is that what's the elasticity of that? I don't know the answer to that.
Mhm.
What I've seen in the past is the more you raise the price to a certain amount, there are some ways in which it becomes more appealing because there are few people who can afford it,
Right.
and it makes it more exclusive. So
Luxury industry.
yeah, so it's a weird kind of dynamic there.
Mm.
Does it have reverse elasticity? Yeah, to some extent.
Well, there's also there's the bifurcation of the market. The consumer will trade up for things that they think hold value. Or if not trade up, they will pay for the Prada handbag if that's important to their self-expression. They think it has value. They think it has lasting value, enduring value, and resale value. And at the same time, excuse me, they'll trade down on things that have become commodities, like sweats. Does somebody need Lululemon? Does somebody need designer yoga pants, or can you use a less expensive yoga pant? And that's where you get many of the department stores and the mass merchants are heightening their private label business. And in doing so, they're creating brands that are exclusive to them and probably less expensive than nationally priced brands.
Marie mentioned a really important trend, which is resale. And we don't see a lot of super luxury brands going into resale yet, but it does feel like 2022, there's going to be a break in the dam. And if you say what will the next 18 months look like? I think we're going to see a lot of brands, superhero luxury brands, going into resale and stepping forward and saying, this is part of our business, because the reality is, it is.
I agree wholeheartedly.
It's one of the best ways to be sustainable if they encourage their consumers to do that, right? So,
and to save a few bucks.
Yeah.
Right. And it keeps you within the brand ecosystem for the buyer, for the reseller. Their old bag can be turned into a new bag within the brand ecosystem. I think there's still opportunities for multi-branded platforms like the Real, Poshmark, ThredUp, but to Richard's point, the brands that have real potency and power, brand heat, they're going to go on. They're going to bring it internally.
One thing about
better at
retail, as long as we're on the subject, I want to do more research on this. I'm not sure what the answer is right this minute. I don't know that the people who are in it, the big brands who are in it, are making money in it. And that has to do with what they pay and what they sell it for, and how much it costs to process, right? Those are the three inputs. And I'm not sure that that's in balance. And we may see either prices paid for vintage products go down, or reselling prices go up in order to make the economics work. I'm not convinced that the economics work right now, but over time they definitely will, because it's going to be an important part of the business and nobody's going to do it for charity.
Right.
Okay.
One of the things that's necessary, though, is that in our culture, vintage is cool. If that ever changes, that's going to be a real impairment to the resale business.
Well,
Okay.
interestingly, like I'm going off. I know that we mentioned briefly the metaverse, but the opportunity in the metaverse to resuscitate vintage archive designs in a playful manner is incredible for luxury brands. So it's there. The vintage doesn't have the wear and tear of what happens to leather when it's been around for 40 years and it kind of gets stiff and, so it's like the metaverse will even help with the idea of vintage being cool. That's just
okay. Well, as long as we're on the metaverse, and Caroline,
go for it, Richard.
I'm really sorry. You're
No,
not
that's fine.
to ask any questions.
Go for it.
As long as we're on the metaverse, I want to come back to something I said a minute ago, which is the long-term issue for retail is making physical and online come together. And the metaverse is one of the ways to do that, because when you're in a store, it's not strange. Almost everyone's had the experience where you go in to buy something X and you come out buying X and Y, or Y instead of X, or X, Y, Z and A, B, C, L, M, N, O, P, because it was such a great experience. And that almost never happens online. Online, the best way to shop online is to know what you're looking for and go and find it, and you can find it at the best price. That element of discovery and exploration and the great experience you have of finding something you weren't expecting and being really happy with it over time as you own it generally doesn't happen online. And the metaverse is, we don't fully know what it is yet because it's not yet built, but it's possible that the metaverse can offer a solution to that, because if you can use that additional technology to discover and to really understand and explore, then you can have the kind of conversion from browser to customer that you can experience in stores, and consumers can have the kind of discovery and experience without having to go. Now, of course, that has many implications, because if online is as good as the store, why do people go to stores? And the answer is they're going to go a lot less. And, you know, we all know what that means, because that's what we've been seeing for the last 10 years. So, but I think the metaverse, as long as you brought it up, Marie, is part of the answer of how those technologies come together.
What you're saying is it's going to bring, you think, maybe the best of both worlds, the convenience of being in your own home, but the actual experience of being in like a virtual reality.
It's possible. It's possible, but it's going to take some time. Even the hardware is not invented for that yet. No one's going to sit around wearing a 5-pound headset on their head in order to go shopping. It's ridiculous. So, so there's a lot to be built, but that is directionally where the world is going.
Okay, interesting. I'm not sure we'll get there in 2022, but
definitely
who
not.
knows? Who knows? We mentioned something earlier that I think everyone probably wants to hear your thoughts on. Is Marie mentioned it slightly, is the Ukraine and the sanctions that are being imposed on Russia. What do you think are the short-term implications of that, and potentially the long-term, and how can brands and retailers manage the uncertainty of what it's going to look like? Maybe Marie, do you want to go first?
Sure. I think for consumers in America, right, this feels like just another body blow. We've gone through 2 years of COVID, and now we're hit with this. And nobody likes to see, you know, like, we're a freedom-loving country, basically, and we don't like to see people that are invaded against their will. And we also don't like to get in the middle of other people's politics. And so we're at that point. We don't have the CNN effect yet, where people are glued to their TV and not shopping. There definitely has been, many global companies and brands have stepped up to the plate and have stopped trading with Russia, and that has a backlash. I mean, Russia is maybe clawing back assets in Russia of of global companies, which is not a good thing, and it could damage global brands in Russia, and so it isn't good at all for retail. It just isn't good for retail and brands and the consumer. But it is, you know, it is good to see corporate America or global, you know, European companies, companies from the UK come together and say, we're going to take a stand and we're not going to trade with you. And they're creating sanctions against Russian assets in other regions of the world.
Okay.
Other than that, I mean, Richard, what do you think?
I think financial markets don't like uncertainty, and shock creates paralysis. And so you see consumers, when you see financial markets react, it has an effect on consumers' thinking, because mostly everyone is connected to the financial markets in one way or another. And either through their personal investments or their employment or the world around them generally. And so the shock and paralysis of sudden change that's negative and uncertainty causes consumers to hold back. And that's a potential risk for spending and the economy generally. Now, we're pretty well insulated, but there's a lot of attention on it. And the human aspect of the suffering is impacting people, as Marie was describing. And so all of that is a negative impact. But you just don't know how this thing is going to end. It could go on and just get worse and worse for years, or it could have a short-term happy ending, or anything in between.
Okay. Okay.
That's the unknown, right?
Yeah, it is, unfortunately. Hopefully it doesn't go any further. We've had some impact on supply chain over the last few months specifically, especially I've noticed with a lot of my clients. How do you think that's been eased, or do you expect it to continue? What are your thoughts on that? And are there any particular segments of retail that you think are more susceptible to supply chain issues going forward?
Well, I do expect it to continue, certainly through 2022. It's better or worse more between companies than between industries, depending on what their sourcing is. We are politically disconnecting more every day from China, and there's a certain amount of displacement that takes place from that. So we're going to see manufacturing continue to move away from China, as we've seen since the tariffs were imposed. Explosion of manufacturing in Vietnam and other places. And I think I answered your question. Was there something else?
No, you're good. Marie,
what are you going to say, Marie?
Yeah, this is why I thought, I think that there will be more nearshoring. I think the supply chain is changing. And I think in the process, across globally, there's inflation through the supply chain because there aren't the same amount of workers. Workers aren't going back. The factories are closed. You can't. So there's inflation inherent in the global supply chain. So if prices have all been lifted, is it possible to, all right, can I get it done closer to home in a shorter period of time and at the same price? I think that this provides that opportunity to rethink how you're sourcing, and that I think is a big deal. And I really like so much of the problem. There's so much waste globally in apparel, with textiles, and if we sourced closer to need, right, it would not be there.
And reduce the number of products they're selling.
Products made. Right. And then you wouldn't be putting things in, you wouldn't be just
storing them.
Destroying it. Right. So, and even if it raises prices a little bit more, we're already talking about prices being very uneven because of the inflation that we've experienced and the supply chain disruptions for the last 2 years. So consumers don't know what the right price is yet. Right? We're figuring it out.
So let's talk about something you mentioned, which is labor shortage. There is data to indicate that the labor shortage is easing. And in fact, I wrote an article about it a few weeks ago that has the data in it. It's entitled The Labor Shortage is Easing, not a very imaginative title. But one of the things that happens when there's a change in the economy is it's people's nature to believe that's what's happening in the current moment is the most important thing that will ever happen, that has ever happened, and it will impact the future. But it doesn't usually work that way. Labor especially goes in cycles. So labor has been in short supply because of a lot of reasons, one of which is the economy is robust. And when that ends, then there is no shortage, there's a job shortage. And there's no job shortage today. But that it's coming, you just don't know when. So these things are cyclical, they're not permanent. And the great resignation that we've seen is, the data I've seen indicates that it's mostly age driven, that it's people under 35 who are resigning all at once in large numbers, and older than that, people who are older than that are not. And that's also not a permanent thing. So we don't know where this will go, but it will change with the moves in the economy.
Yeah, I really was speaking to the global supply chain and factories around the world, some of which, you know, have closed. They just haven't reopened. So those sources of goods, like to your point, if we're not sourcing from China anymore, and then the smaller factories in Thailand and Vietnam have shut down. The few factories, there's fewer factories to source from. Their prices go up. So like, let's bring it to Honduras or bring it closer. You know, the thing about, you know, what I learned in economics is demand changes in a heartbeat. Supply takes time to change the supply part of the equation. But COVID has forced us to consider it, and now even more so with what's happening globally, politically.
Okay. So then now I want to move on to, we kind of touched on metaverse already, so we don't need to go into that, but what about stores? So, you know, more people are shopping online, more people are going in stores than they were a year ago. But what about, do you think there are some brands that are not having success with their physical stores and maybe thinking of closing them, or the experience, they need to change the use of that space instead? Like Amazon, for example, is one that is looking at maybe closing some of their stores.
So I don't want to be Amazon is fabulous at everything they do, except operate physical stores. So I think that in operating physical stores, I'm not sure what their motivation is. Is their motivation to sell things or to learn? And learning is a good thing. And Amazon is a learning organization, and they are always learning about the consumer. But that learning ability that's behind the screen when you and I shop online, they're putting it front and center in a physical store, and it doesn't make for a fun shopping experience. And there's no reason not to shop in a fun shopping experience. Like, because there's so many alternatives for shopping to get the goods that you want. If you go to a physical store and it's not fun, it's a pain, you can't find the products that you want, you can't get the service that you need, you don't go back. And so the demands of a physical store are all that an online store is and more.
So Amazon's an amazing company. And one of the ways in which they're amazing is how they dare to do things that haven't been done before, knowing that they will fail at some or most of them and still being willing to do it, and the people stay in the culture. And that's amazing. And I have to say, kudos to Walmart for being willing to try things too. And with all their resources and capital and human talent and software, it is amazing how successful they are not in physical retail. And what that says is not just how different physical stores are, but how hard it is. When I talk to retail CEOs, almost all, and I say, how many stores do you want? They almost all say, I want fewer stores and smaller stores. And given what has happened with retail real estate, I ask them, well, what if for the price of your smaller store, you could have a bigger store? What would you do with it? Because I believe that in order to get consumers to come to stores, especially given that online is getting better all the time, and people are adapting to online shopping more and more all the time, what do you have to do? What has to happen in a store for it to be worthwhile? Well, part of that is improvements in the store associate, but part of that is improvements in the experience aside from the store associate, finding things, having entertainment, food, different things. And no one's really given me a great answer to what would you do with a bigger store if you could have a bigger one for free. And I think that to me is the challenge of retail right now. I think about the paradigm of experiences being Las Vegas and Orlando, no one goes, or almost no one goes there to shop. When they get there, a lot of people do shop because they're in the mood. So if you could draw people into your store for a reason that relates to your product, but isn't about shopping, you would enhance the experience, increase your shopping. And by the way, when people shop in Las Vegas and Orlando and other places they go when they're in the mood, they tend not to make price their highest priority. And so you're more likely as a retailer to get your full margin. So if you can create the right experience, you will enhance retail stores. And that is the test that's coming for physical store retailers.
So Richard, you probably remember Rick Caruso talking about the mall being dead maybe 8 years ago or 7 years ago at NRF. And what he did was he created a mall that was an experience. It was an outdoor indoor shopping center that you wanted to go to. The windows were beautiful advertisements. They were eye candy. There were places to sit. There were services like babysitting. And as you're sitting and enjoying, you end up as an adult buying a souvenir of a good experience. And a souvenir could be a Gucci handbag, it could be an Hermes scarf, it could be a pair of Levi blue jeans, right? But we kind of anchor a good experience with a product. And that's what retailers need to learn, and hospitality knows. Look at American Dream has created.
I was just going to talk about that.
Yeah. They've created that. I'm going to go visit them on Friday. I'm so excited. But they've created, a mecca, and that's what you need to create, something that people want to go to.
So it's very unpopular to talk about them as a model now because they're suffering from the pandemic. The financing is a mess. They may have to close it. I don't know.
Right.
But it is really the paradigm of where retail is going. The concept of it is the future of retail, because you can go there for a water park, you can go there for a children's park, you can go there for ice skating, you can go there for skiing. And if you do that, you're going to wind up walking past and engaging in the food, but also the retail. And creating doesn't have to be that level, but some kind of engaging experience for a consumer to go to is a big opportunity for retail, especially given that there's all this extra space to be creative in. Now, retailers are not organizations that are organized to provide entertainment, but that's going to have to change for stores to be successful. And it's not just in store. The same thing's going to happen online, because we're going to start seeing revenue streams come to retailers who create engaging content. And the revenue streams that come from the entertainment in stores and the entertainment online could be significant for retailers who do it right. And that's really hard to do because retail's hard enough already.
And so you could see the retail investment move from inventory to experience, to creating experiences and content. And guess what? If you go to American Dream and they don't have the product that you want because you've had a great experience, but because they only had 7 and they sold out of all 7 today, they can give you an NFT, and that's where the metaverse comes in. Like you could actually get a virtual thing, and the real one is on its way.
Okay, we should do one on NFTs, because I have a lot to say about that. And
I know. No, but it's a way, like one of the things that people say is like retailers feel obliged to have lots of inventory in store, and like luxury doesn't do that. Luxury makes it look very limited. There's things behind in the back rooms. Nothing wrong with really and why doesn't luxury do it? Because luxury is displaying almost priceless artwork. I mean, that's kind of the mindset when in their displays. Like, this is covetable. They're making it covetable. When there's 20 of something stacked up high, it's not covetable. But so I know Deborah Weinswig, our CEO and founder, wrote something recently about Walmart's new department store and how they're creating experiences and in-store vignettes, what department stores used to do. So Walmart is really elevating itself and becoming a new department store. You know, maybe the department store of the 21st century.
So tell us a little bit more about that, Marie. What are they envisioning to do in Walmart? What is the new department store going to look like, do you think?
So they have vignettes, like they have the bed, like if you go to Macy's or Bloomingdale's and you see something assorted in the way it would be worn or dressed, the look of a home, the look of a bedroom, they're doing that. They're creating experiential retail. They're also testing live streaming. Yeah, and you know, at NRF this year, Brian Cornell, the CEO of Target, spoke about his shop. He really envisioned Target as being a one-stop shop opportunity with Apple, with Ulta. So shop in shops that are really creating new in-store experiences that is not all, Target is not bearing the weight of it all. Target has to do some of it, but they have Apple there doing part of it, and they have Ulta doing part of it. And those two big brands are pulling in new customers too.
So there's also something, as long as you mentioned Target, there's something really interesting going on at Target in their private label that, right? So they've created their own private labels, and they've said, unlike private label in the past, we're not saying that it's as good or almost as good and it's cheaper. We're saying this is a brand. And they're using the credibility that they've established as a leading retailer to imbue their house brands with quality that's competitive or superior to the brands that are in their store. And that is unique. Now, the only people who can do it are people who are perceived as high quality as they are by consumers. And so that's hard. Not everybody can do it. But where you can do it, that's a really interesting way for retail to go, because you're creating even a wholesale brand out of your house brands. Revolve Clothing does that. They use data to create their house brands that compete very effectively with the brands, the third-party brands that they sell, and they wholesale their house brands to other retailers because they have credibility. And not everybody can do it, but when you can do it, it's a great business because it doesn't depend on piling it high and selling it low.
Okay. We've been talking about department stores a lot, but some of them seem to be not doing very well. What do you think is going to take their place? You think it's the new department store we just talked about, or something else?
Well, let's
entirely
talk about why they're not doing well. There's a lot of reasons. One of the reasons is that the motivation for consumers to shop now is different than it was in the past. Buying things, particularly fashion, used to be about status. It's not about status anymore. It's about personal values. And brands that can convey their personal values, which resonate with consumers, will succeed and will sell at full price and be very profitable and grow. And they grow because their marketing is effective, because they're conveying values, but also because consumers want to share their personal values with their friends. And so consumers do the heavy lifting for those brands on social media and word of mouth. So what does that mean for department stores? You can't do that as a department store because there's a cacophony of values from each of the hundreds or thousands of brands that are in your store. And so so when the message is status, it's easy to say, well, Neiman Marcus is here and Macy's is here and Target is here. But when it's about personal values, it's a big muddle. And so the best you can have is a muddled message. And when you have a muddled message, people tend not to come. And that creates a mess. The other thing that's happening is that for the last 20 years, retail has been beating the risk out of its business for a long time to maximize profitability. So it beats the risk out of the fashion risk, it beats economic risk, and that makes the store a lot less interesting. When you're running it off a spreadsheet and only the bottom line matters today, it's harder to have an engaging experience like American Dream. So a lot of trends are conspiring against department stores right now.
Yeah, but you do see, like Macy's has talked about getting more, upping its private label quotient. And Macy's had developed private labels in the 90s that were very successful, and they tried to treat them as brands, like Richard, you just mentioned that Target is doing. And they're going to re-up that focus. And what's really good, you know, the strategy is that the national brands, like a really hot brand like Nike, or maybe a Ralph Lauren, maybe Louis Vuitton in handbags, or Michael Kors, will pull people into a store. And then once people are in the store, there's a much wider consideration set of what to purchase. And that's where, you know, a retailer can present its private label brands, and they don't necessarily, they become exclusive house brands. They're not private label. We have to like change the vernacular. And maybe they have a fashion point of view. Maybe they're the same price. Maybe they're the same quality. Maybe they're better quality. You know, there's some mix of quality, price, and fashion point of view that has to differentiate the house brand. But we see Macy's doing more of that. Macy's, you know, Macy's has a lot of stores, but believe it, didn't they just hire away the head of private label from Target to Macy's? I think I just saw that this week, yesterday.
I didn't see that, but if I was
no surprise,
that's what I'd want to do.
Right. It's no surprise. It's like Target has done such a good job with, you know, their exclusives and their private label business, the two. To your point, Richard, Target is a trusted brand. And one of the reasons Target is a trusted brand, more so than your typical American department store, is it's not high-low pricing. In fact, one of the most compelling things I think Target came out with last Christmas, in October, they said, we will guarantee you any price that we lower, we will adjust your pricing. If you buy something in October and we lower it the week of December 24th, we will make good to you. So they were telling consumers, buy it in October while it's here. Don't wait for it to be marked down. If it's marked down, we'll make it a price adjustment for you. But that, like, think of the trust that engenders. Like Target, so Target is like, really, we're watching a new breed of department stores. And if it isn't high-low, that's a really good thing, as Martha Stewart would say, right?
Okay. I want to talk a little bit more about the future now. So what consumer habits do you think were created in the pandemic, and which ones do you expect to stay? Obviously, more online shopping is an obvious one, but what other ones do you expect consumers to continue doing as we're in the new normal? I don't know who wants to go first.
I'll go first.
Okay.
Definitely online grocery will stick. Before today, I just reached out to the people that do our consumer survey on a weekly basis. And as of last week, 24% of shoppers are buying grocery online. So that's a big number. And we see that they're buying more. What are they? The non-perishables, they're buying more frequently than the perishables. No surprise, right? People may still want to pick their lettuce and their tomatoes and oranges, but are happy buying the cereals and you know, the toilet paper and stuff online. So that's going to stick, even if growth moderates this year, and even if it, you know, softens, if it's flat this year. Over time, grocery penetration, online grocery penetration will increase. Another thing, one of the habits that came up during COVID was cleaning out, reselling, eliminating. And I think people were able to monetize the value of their closet, which they didn't use. And I think that is, you know, until people get super busy again, I think that will continue to drive resale in terms of bringing product, you know, providing product for resale.
Okay.
Well, Marie, I'd love you to send me that source for the 24%, because I have a bet with a grocery CEO that it would pass 20% within 5 years from about 3 years ago. And I think if that number is real, I'm getting a bottle of scotch out of this.
It's our survey. It's our proprietary data. We will.
I'd love to see it. Okay. So I want to expand on what Marie, I'm going to dodge your question and expand on what Marie was talking about, because I think grocery is one of, or the biggest opportunities in retail right now because of the incredible upheaval that it's undergoing. Most people still shop the way their moms did, weekly shopping or bi-weekly. You take a cart, you go through all the aisles, you put it in your cart, you stand online, you pay for it. And that is changing very rapidly now. And the pandemic accelerated that, of course. And where I think it's going has to do with the time that you save by shopping online. And what I mean is, imagine that there was an app on your phone, and it's a grocery shopping app, and you look at paper towels. And what it says to you is, here's the price if we deliver it in 3 days or a week or 2 weeks. And that's a real thing, because you know the cadence of when you're going to need paper towels. And here's the price if you need it in 10 or 20 minutes. And you pick. And you can go through your list and put things on and choose which one you want, and time becomes a variable of that. So now imagine that that's how you shop. So if you're making something and guests are coming in an hour, you're going to go on the app, you're going to say, I'll pay whatever, get me the eggs or flour, sugar, whatever that I need in the next 20 minutes. And no minute is short enough, and no price is unreasonable for it. You'll pay a lot for that kind of convenience. But it won't matter to you whether the person who's operating the app owns that inventory the minute they're offering it to you or not. You don't care if it's coming from GoPuff or someone else in 10 minutes, or whether it's coming from Ocado in a week or whatever time. So the opportunity in grocery is the party that can aggregate that offering has an enormous opportunity. And the grocery industry thinks of its stores as its anchor, which it has been for a very long time. But if the opportunity is the way I'm describing it, then the stores are as much of a ball and chain as they are an anchor. And it means that we're going to start seeing dark grocery stores the same way we've been seeing retail stores on almost every shopping street in America. And all of that upheaval means that the leaders who are the leaders today will not so likely be the leaders tomorrow, because it's going to be a completely different business. And that kind of change creates enormous opportunity. It's a logistics opportunity, because offering something in 20 minutes or 3 weeks is different and takes different skills than getting stuff on a shelf in a store that customers then pick and deliver to themselves without your having to account for the labor. It's a completely different business. So that creates enormous opportunity for labor, for technology, for consumers, for the saving of time and use of capital. And that is just, I think, one of the most interesting things there is right now in retail.
Yeah, wasn't it a year or two ago that Walmart was testing having their own employees make grocery deliveries or online deliveries on their way home?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's like there's so many different ways to
Yeah.
configure it, you know?
Yeah. Well, one of the things you're raising is the breaking up of the tasks, right? Because when you think about that, it doesn't have to be just Walmart employees. If you had a regular relationship with somebody who was driving by your store every day after work at 5 o'clock, why wouldn't they spend 30 minutes to be your delivery person if you could build a relationship with them? So you can, we've seen the Uberization of it, right?
Yes.
You talk to your Uber driver and it turns out they have a whole other occupation. They just do this for a few hours.
That's true.
Well, there's no reason why that won't happen in other ways as well. And the technology makes that possible. So we're going to see grocery break up into lots of different places. It's no accident that Albertsons, which is the #2 grocer in the country, they own Safeway and a whole lot of other chains, has put itself up for sale, because there's a consolidation required when you have an Albertsons store next to a Kroger store and 24% of people are ordering online. You just don't need both stores. So there's a consolidation required, and they have to preserve capital in order to be able to invest in the way in which the online business is changing. So I think it's the most interesting thing in retail. I think it's one of the most interesting opportunities that the grocery business has ever seen.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a new venture for Amazon.
Yeah, and then
Well,
there's
that's the other thing. It's amazing. Amazon spent $13 billion to buy Whole Foods, and they're not #1. They're not even close. Why isn't Amazon more successful in grocery? They're not even more successful in grocery online. It's amazing how different the opportunity is in that business, and how Walmart's #1 in grocery.
right.
And that's amazing.
Yeah, but Walmart's #1 because they have the most stores.
Well, you know, consumers are smart, and they go where
Value.
they go for value. They go for, you know, who offers the best combination of everything.
But then then like one piece that you're not missing out, that, and I don't know the answer here, the brands that are anchors in the grocery store, like the Tides and the Dove chocolates and, you know, whatever, they can go direct to consumer. And what happens with that?
Okay, they don't know how. And they've never done that. It's a completely different business.
I know.
Now, you're raising another topic, which is if you think about the supermarket as we know it as having two parts, core and periphery. In the core are things like Tide and mustard, ketchup, salt, the things that are staples and low margin, and things that are on the periphery are prepared products that have much higher margin. Those core products are ideal for subscription, because you know when you're going to use them. Delivering one box of Tide is highly inefficient for all of the logistical reasons and costs that we know. But if you bundle it together with other things for you and your neighbor, and your Tide and your salt and your ketchup and all those core things are coming to your house on a regular cadence for each of them, there's a real opportunity there. And it's a completely different business model than the one that anybody in the grocery business is in today.
It's group buying.
It's all out there,
right?
And it's there for the taking, and it hasn't been built yet. And that's an enormous opportunity.
In China, they've done group buying. You know?
Yes, we see it more in Asia, Singapore too.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm not sure that group buying is the thing as much as coordinating all the logistics the way FedEx and UPS do when they deliver to you and your neighbor at the same time.
Sounds like you're describing Costco, but but more logistically, right? We'll see. So we're getting close to the end of the session. Maybe we can just sum up like, what do you expect for 2022 in like a summary for each of you, if that's okay?
So for me, it will be an interesting year. I think inflation will tone down as we go through the year. By the end of the year, it's going to be a different year than the beginning of the year. There's lots of new exciting fashion trends. People are buying electronics. I think during the course of the year, we're going to see a switch as consumers really do focus more on experiences, as we see that heighten and pulling money away from products, and then the tension that creates amongst retailers and amongst brands. And so if it does create tension, then you could start to see retailers, like last year at Christmas time in the second half of the year, it was a very mild promotional environment. Does that heat up as there's fewer discretionary dollars to spend by the end of this year? And the reason I think there will be fewer discretionary dollars to spend is inflation and the lack of government stimulus. Right. It's like last year retail benefited from a lot of government stimulus and people not doing experiences. So between a resurgence of experiences, high inflation, and the lack of government stimulus, it makes for a more muted environment. In that environment, there's bifurcation, luxury benefits, and value benefits, and the middle gets. And who's the middle now? Like, it used to be that I would say the department stores, but is Amazon the middle? I think Amazon is the middle.
Maybe.
And AWS is doing super well, but their retail margins, I would worry about them, as well as anybody who's in the middle.
Well, in terms of the rest of the year, I think it's about inflation. And I think inflation is about the Fed. And if the Fed does what it did in the early 80s, which is everything it could to put the kibosh on inflation, then the economy is in trouble and retail's in trouble with it. And it's not clear what the Fed will do because inflation won't stop itself. Now, we've seen a lot of things external to our economy going on in the world that could create shocks that could cause the economy to rupture, and it's impossible to say what of that will really happen. So I don't know, but I think that the rest of this year is a question of inflation. Can we get it under control without breaking the economy?
Okay. Okay, great. So thank you both so much for today's session. It was great, and I'm looking forward to seeing how 2022 falls out. Hopefully, we can get inflation under control. Thank you to all of our audience. I hope you found it very interesting and very valuable for you and for your business. And to learn more about Mazars in the US and our consumer products thought leadership and service offerings, please visit us on www.mazars.us. Thank you again, and I hope you all have a great day.
Thank you, Caroline, and thank you, Mazars, and thank you, Marie.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Marie.
Great
Thanks,
to be
Richard.
here.
You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.